I'm Mike Greiner, a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, then maybe you could like this video, subscribe to this channel, and maybe even hit that little bell that will notify you when I post a new video. You might notice that I'm dressed down a little bit today because it is the weekend and I'm rooting for my home team, the Detroit Tigers. But unfortunately, the news never ends. And so I want to talk today about one recent development, which has to do with Florida banning the teaching of critical race theory in its schools. Now, I would be willing to bet that if you asked 9 out of 10 people in Florida what critical race theory is, they would have absolutely no idea what it is. And this is no criticism of Florida. I mean, this is just a fact that critical race theory is a very academic discipline. It's something that's discussed among scholars trying to analyze the way society works. And within that context, critical race theory is a very vital conversation. But the reality is, no such thing as critical race theory is taught to any high school students or anybody below probably the upper level college classes. So what's the big deal with critical race theory? Well, as it turns out, critical race theory is another one of these straw men who get put up by the Republicans to try to create some type of outrage among the white Republicans, who is their base of support, to try to get them to support an agenda which is inherently opposed to their own best interests. After all, the Republican agenda is one that completely benefits the very, very wealthy, the ultra-rich in this country. So how are they able to get the support for this from so many other people? By directing their attention away from what really is their agenda and towards this culture war, as they call it. This sense that somehow white people, especially white men, are being attacked, and that the Republicans are standing up for the pride of white people and white men. And this is what this critical race theory is being held up as an example of these attacks upon white men and white people in general. And it's just a way really to generate outrage for the Republicans, kind of to direct attention away from what they're really trying to do, which is really to steal money from everybody else. So why is this such a big deal? Why do we even care if they're saying you can't teach critical race theory in the public schools in Florida? After all, that would be something akin to saying you can't teach relativity to high school students. They can't understand it. It's beyond them, and really won't be able to engage in conversations about this theory until you get to the upper levels of college. So the bigger issue is that in addition to that, as an example of critical race theory, what was held up was the 1619 Project. And this is really something that is disturbing, because the 1619 Project was an amazing piece of journalism and historical scholarship, examining the history of slavery and racism in America, dating back to the first arrivals of slaves here in the United States in 1619, thus the name. So what this is banning then is not just some abstract academic theory that deals with how racism has ingrained itself in the institutions across America, but it has to do with teaching the real history of America, which unfortunately includes things like slavery, includes things like the Tulsa Race Massacre, which Tom Hanks in a recent New York Times editorial pointed out he was never taught in school, and he was never taught anything about anything like this in school. And the reality here is that Republicans are trying to make us forget about this. Why would they be trying to do that? Well, number one, they're trying to do that to support their agenda. And the way that they support their agenda is by engaging in the culture war and kind of pushing the attention of white people away from what they're really trying to accomplish, which is basically allowing the extremely wealthy to steal all they can from American society. The second thing that they're trying to accomplish, though, is that they're trying to essentially undermine the progress that is being made in the wake of the George Floyd protests. There's a demographic change going on in America. Within the relative near future, you're going to no longer have white people as the absolute majority of Americans. So that's what's kind of driving all this panic right now by Republicans and giving them the basis to get people riled up about it. And it's this sense that the white majority, who have been in charge for more than 200 years in America, suddenly are facing the reality that they're not going to be the majority anymore. That if all the people of color were to gather together and vote for their own interests, suddenly the white people would no longer be able to impose their will upon them. So that's really what this is all about. And one way to undermine these protests is to make white people feel as if the efforts to try to extend justice to black people and other people of color somehow take something away from white people. This is something I've never entirely understood. It's something akin to when some people get so upset about gay marriage, for example. Like, I'm married to a woman, and I don't see how allowing two men or two women who love each other marry each other somehow undermines the institution that I'm a part of. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's the same thing with anti-racism, where if black people are given the same opportunities that white people like me are given, how does that harm me? There's not like some limit to the number of opportunities out there. In fact, if anything, what we could do is potentially expand the opportunities by bringing more people into our system. And that's been shown to happen again and again. But that's the argument that is being made by Republicans, which is that white people need to be worried because somehow giving black people and other people of color justice is somehow going to undermine the white people. And then the third thing that they're trying to do is that they're trying to maintain some sense of victimization, some sense of moral superiority, because they really are defending the indefensible. Anybody who's seen the videos that are out there which show the way that black people are treated when they're stopped by the police is going to be outraged. And as those same people then study about the history of racism and the history of slavery in America, they're going to become even more outraged and want to make even more change. So what they need to do is literally whitewash, no pun intended, literally whitewash our history so that we don't see what has happened to black people and we can no longer sense this outrage. I remember when I was growing up, I thought that a lot of the arguments about racism were somewhat overblown. That was because I wasn't exposed to it. I lived in a white culture. I went to a primarily white high school. My friends were primarily white. This was in the era before everybody had a camera on their cell phone. So I couldn't imagine the way it feels for a black man to be pulled over by the police. It was really not until college and I started getting exposed to a broader group of people that I've been able to see some of the burdens that have been placed upon people of color. And that made me want to change it. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it so that other people are kept ignorant of what's historically happened in America. To say that there is racism in America and that it needs to be addressed is not to say something inherently bad about white people. It doesn't take something away from white people. What it does is it gives us the opportunity to try to change. It gives us the opportunity to try to take what was wrong in the past and move to something better. And that is actually what these people are trying to avoid from happening with their attacks on critical race theory. So, if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to see your comments below. In the meantime, let's spread the word about the fact that critical race theory is nothing to be concerned about, and the bigger concern should be the banning, really the real example of cancel culture, which is being perpetuated on us by Republicans. And banning the teaching of anything related to the 1619 Project is certainly nothing more than an effort to whitewash our society and make people just not even aware of what actually happened in the history of this country. So if you enjoyed this video, then if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, maybe even click that little bell that'll let you know when I post a new video. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next video, and let's hope for continued progress. Take care.